A house is a living thing. It breathes, it settles, it groans. Its pipes tick, its floors creak, its wooden bones expand and contract with the changing of the seasons. We tell ourselves these are the sounds of a home, benign, familiar noises that we filter out, dismissing them as the simple physics of a structure settling into the earth. But what if they're not? What if the house is not just settling, but reacting? What if the sounds are not from the house at all, but from something else? Something that lives within the house, in the dark, forgotten spaces. Something that watches and waits. Tonight, we are unearthing 3 true, chilling accounts from people who grew up in a house that was not just old, it was occupied. These are stories of a presence that refused to be ignored, a darkness that to this day they cannot fully explain.
My story begins when I was 9, in a house that was perfectly average in every way, except for the closet in my bedroom. It was a small walk-in closet, deep but narrow, and from the first night we moved in, I knew there was something wrong with it. It started with the sounds, not a scratching or a whispering. It was a soft, dry popping, like the sound of someone cracking their knuckles, one joint at a time. Pop, pop, pop. It would happen at random hours, always in the dead of night. I would lie in my bed, frozen, staring at the closed louvered door, listening to that dry, skeletal sound from within. My mom said it was the house settling. My dad said it was the pipes. But I knew what I was hearing. It was the sound of something stretching. Then I started to notice that my clothes were never where I left them. I'd hang my shirts on the rail, and in the morning they would all be pushed, crushed to the far left side, as if to make room for something on the right. I'd show my parents, but they'd get frustrated. "You're just messy, son. Clean your room." I became terrified of that closet. I refused to go in it. I piled my clothes in a laundry basket in the corner of my room, which just got me in more trouble. But I didn't care. I would stuff a towel under the door at night to block the light from the hallway and to stop whatever it was from coming out. My little brother, Ben, who was 5, was the first one to give it a name. He had a speech impediment, and his words were often jumbled, but one afternoon he wandered into my room when I was playing video games. He stopped and just pointed at the closet. His face went pale. He tugged on my shirt and whispered, "The folded man. He's watching." A cold electric shock went up my spine. "What did you say, Ben?" "The folded man," he repeated, his eyes wide. "He's in the closet. He doesn't have a face. He's wrong." I tried to laugh it off. "There's no man in there, buddy. It's just a closet." "He's folded up," Ben said, his voice dropping to a terrified whimper. "He waits. I don't like him." He ran out of the room and refused to ever enter it again. After that, the presence became more confident. I started smelling it. A strange, sharp, metallic scent, like ozone or old pennies that would leak from under the closet door. And the sounds changed. The popping was now joined by a sound I can only describe as unfolding. A dry, papery, leathery rustle, as if something large and complex was slowly methodically uncreasing itself in the dark. I slept with my back to that door, my blanket pulled over my head, my Little League baseball bat on the pillow next to me. I would lie awake for hours, listening to the pop, rustle, pop, and praying for the sun to come up. The final night in that house, I was 15. My parents were out at a dinner, and I was home alone watching Ben. We were in the living room watching a movie. Ben fell asleep on the couch. Around 10 p.m., the power to the whole neighborhood cut out with a sudden thud. The house was plunged into total darkness. No wind, no storm, just a sudden suffocating blackness and silence. The happy cinematic sounds from the TV were gone. I sat there, frozen. Ben stirred in its sleep next to me. And then, from all the way upstairs, from my bedroom, I heard my closet door creak open. A long, slow, agonizing groan of old hinges. My blood turned to ice. "Ben," I whispered, shaking him. "Ben, wake up. We have to go. Now." He woke up, confused. "What's wrong?" "We're going to the neighbors," I said, pulling him off the couch. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking, and turned on its flashlight. I pointed it at the dark stairwell. "What is it?" Ben whispered. "The folded man. I think he's out." That word, a word we hadn't spoken in years, was all it took. Ben started to cry, a high-pitched, terrified sound. "He's here!" "Shut up, Ben. Be quiet," I hissed, pulling him toward the front door. And then we heard it, from the top of the stairs. Pop, pop, pop. It was coming down the stairs, but it wasn't the sound of footsteps. It was the sound of something impossibly heavy, something with too many joints, lurching and unfolding itself as it moved. A heavy drag, pop, scrape. I didn't wait. I grabbed Ben's hand, fumbled with the deadbolt, and threw the front door open. We ran out onto the lawn, screaming for our neighbors. We didn't stop running until we were safe inside their brightly lit kitchen. The police came. They found nothing. The house was empty. The closet in my room was open, all the clothes pushed to one side. The power came back on an hour later, with no explanation from the electric company. We moved out a month later. My dad lost his job and said we had to downsize. But I know the real reason. The night after the incident, my father, a man I had never seen cry, was sitting at the kitchen table at 3 a.m., just staring at the wall. When I asked him what was wrong, he looked at me, his face pale and gray. He whispered, "I went up to your room after the police left. I looked in the closet. I saw it, son. It was folded up in the corner, tucked under the shelf. A man, but all wrong." My little brother Ben didn't speak for 6 months. He's an adult now, but he still suffers from severe claustrophobia. He can't be in a room without a window, he can't be in an elevator, and he can't sleep with the closet door closed. Our second story comes from a 22-year-old woman named Eliza, who took a job house-sitting for a wealthy architect. The house itself was a work of art, a minimalist masterpiece of glass and steel cantilevered over a ravine in the middle of a remote forest in rural Washington. The architect was clear. The house is fully automated, the Wi-Fi is fast, Just don't let the plants die, and don't go into the woods. Enjoy the solitude. For the first few days, it was a dream. Eliza felt like she was living in a luxury hotel. She spent her days reading, surrounded by glass walls that offered a 360-degree view of the stunning, ancient forest. The house was her fortress of solitude. But a fortress of glass has a critical weakness. You can always see out, and something can always see in. The first incident happened on a rainy Tuesday night. She was making dinner, listening to music. She glanced out the floor-to-ceiling kitchen window into the dark, rain-swept woods, and she saw it. A flash of white. It was gone in an instant, just a pale vertical shape darting between two massive cedar trees. She stopped, her heart suddenly loud in her ears. A deer, she told herself, just a white-tailed deer. But the shape had seemed tall, too tall. She tried to forget it, but the house's silence, once peaceful, now felt heavy and watchful. The next night, she was in the second-floor master bedroom. The entire back wall was a single pane of glass overlooking the dark ravine. She was getting ready for bed when she heard a sound, a soft, wet smear against the glass. She froze. She was on the second floor. She crept to the window, peering into the blackness. The rain had stopped. She saw nothing. But when she got closer, she saw the streak, a long, greasy, pale smear on the outside of the window, running from the top corner down to the bottom. It looked like someone had dragged their hand or their face all the way down the glass. She called the homeowner. He was in Tokyo. He laughed it off. "It's the wind. It does strange things with the sap from the trees. Just clean it off. Don't worry." But it wasn't sap. The next morning, she went outside to look. The smear was thick, waxy, and pale, like solidified animal fat, like tallow. And in the middle of it, she could make out the faint, unmistakable impression of a large, splayed hand. She spent the rest of the day with every blind in the house closed. She felt like a trapped animal. The beautiful glass house was now just a transparent box. The final night, the storm of the century hit. The wind howled like a grieving animal, and the rain came down in horizontal sheets. The power, as she had feared, cut out. The house plunged into a disorienting total blackness. The backup generator failed to start. She was alone, in a glass box, in the middle of a dark forest, with something that could climb. She huddled on the living room sofa, her phone's flashlight her only comfort, and she watched the storm. The lightning was near constant, illuminating the threshing trees in terrifying split-second flashes. And in one of those flashes, she saw it. It was on the deck, right outside the glass. It was tall, pale, and seemed to be melting in the rain. Its skin was the color and texture of tallow running in waxy rivulets down its featureless face. It had no eyes, no nose, just a dark, round, open-mouthed hole. It was pressed against the glass, its waxy hands splayed wide, just staring into the room, waiting. Eliza didn't scream. She couldn't. She was paralyzed. The lightning flashed again. It was still there, unmoving. Then it began to slide. It dragged its pale, melting face down the glass, leaving a thick, greasy trail behind it. It was moving towards the sliding door. She heard a soft thud as it bumped against the door, and then the sound of its waxy fingers fumbling with the handle. She finally found her voice and she screamed. She ran to the solid steel pantry in the kitchen, locked herself inside, and dialed 911, her voice a hysterical, sobbing mess. She stayed in that pantry for 4 hours, listening to the storm and the sound of something wet and heavy smearing itself against the outside walls of the house, trying to find a way in. When the police arrived at dawn, the thing was gone. The house was just a house, but every single window on both floors was covered in a thick, greasy, pale, tallow-like residue, and the glass was covered in deep, gouging scratches, as if something with inhuman strength had been trying to claw its way in. The architect sold the house a week later.
Story 3. The Man on the Driveway.
Our final story is, in many ways, the most disturbing. It lacks the overt, monstrous horror of the first two. Instead, it's a story of a quiet, insidious, and impossible friendship. A secret that twists a childhood memory into something profoundly unnatural. This story comes from a man named Mark, about an encounter he had when he was 8. Mark lived on a quiet, safe street, the kind of place where every kid knew every crack in the sidewalk. His favorite thing to do was ride his red bicycle up and down the block. At the corner, there was a house that always fascinated him. It was a little worn, but had a wide, long driveway and a perfectly kept lawn. Most afternoons, an older man would be standing in that driveway. He wore a neat, old-fashioned hat, a crisp shirt, and he would just stand where the driveway met the sidewalk, watching the street. He never stepped onto the sidewalk. He never left his property. When Mark rode by, the man would give him a broad, warm, grandfatherly smile and wave. "Hello there, young man," he'd call out. "That's a fine bicycle you have." Mark, following his mother's rule to never talk to strangers, would just wave back shyly and keep riding. This went on for weeks. The friendly, silent man in the hat. He became a familiar part of the neighborhood landscape. One afternoon, the man called out again. "You know, my name's Harold. It's all right, you can talk to me from over there. I won't cross the driveway." Mark stopped his bike on the curb, his feet on the grass. He was still on his side of the street. "My name's Mark," he said. They talked. It was innocent. Harold asked about school. He told Mark a simple joke about a squirrel. He seemed kind, patient, and lonely. They developed a routine. Every day, Mark would ride to the corner and talk to Harold from across the street. Mark on the sidewalk, Harold on his driveway. Harold never, ever crossed that line. Mark started to notice things about him. Harold seemed to know small details he'd never mentioned. "How was your little brother's birthday party?" he asked one day. Mark was stunned. He had just had a party for his little brother. "I saw the balloons from down the street," Harold said, smiling. "Looked like a lot of fun." It was a logical explanation. Mark forgot about it. One day, Mark rode by, and Harold wasn't there. The driveway was empty. The curtains in the house were drawn. This happened for a week. Mark felt a strange sense of loss. He was riding past the house again when he saw a woman in the backyard watering flowers. He'd never seen anyone else there. He got brave. He pushed his bike across the empty street, the first time he had ever broken his mother's rule, and went to the back gate. The woman, who looked to be in her 70s, seemed surprised to see him. "Can I help you, sweetheart?" "I was just wondering where Mr. Harold is. The man with the hat? Is he on a trip?" The woman's friendly expression faded. She wiped her hands on her apron. "Mr. Harold? Who told you about him?" "He's my friend. He stands on the driveway and talks to me,"
The woman was quiet for a long moment. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice soft, "my husband's name was Harold. He passed away last year." Mark felt a cold, sharp feeling in his chest. "No," he said. "That's not right. I just talked to him last week. He wears a hat, and he smiles." "He did love his hat," the woman said, a sad smile on her own face. "He was a kind man. Would you like to see a picture?" She went inside and came back with a small framed photograph. Mark looked at it and his blood ran cold. The man in the picture was Harold. He had the same kind hat, the same broad smile. But on his left cheek, there was a long, thin, pale scar that ran from the corner of his eye to his mouth. It was a very distinctive, unmistakable scar. The man Mark had been talking to, the man who had stood in that driveway for months, had a perfectly plain, smooth face. He had no scar. Mark's entire body went cold. He stared at the photo, at the scar. He looked at the woman. He looked at the empty driveway. I have to go," he stammered. He backed away, got on his bike, and rode home as fast as he could. He never told anyone. Who would believe him? The story doesn't end there. Years later, after Mark had moved away, he was researching his old town's history online. He found an old digitized newspaper archive. He searched for Harold and the house's address. He found an article from 1952. The headline read, "Local man killed in tragic driveway accident." The story detailed how a man named Harold's brother, a man with no family, no job, and a history of mental disturbance, had been struck and killed by a car right at the end of that very driveway. The article described him as a local eccentric who would stand at the end of the driveway for hours, waving at cars. Mark realized the truth. The ghost he had befriended wasn't the kind, scarred husband. It was the other one, the eccentric. And the woman, she had never mentioned her husband had a brother. But the final, most terrifying detail came at the very end of the article. A single sentence. The man's body was discovered with a small red child's bicycle, which he had apparently just stolen from a nearby yard, lying next to him on the road. Mark suddenly understood the magic trick Mr. Smiles had wanted to show him, the race he'd wanted to have. He had never been befriending a child. He was looking for a replacement. The folded man in the closet, the tallow figure in the storm, the smiling ghost on the driveway. 3 encounters with a truth we are desperate to ignore, that the walls of our homes, the glass of our windows, and the familiar faces in our neighborhood are not the shields we believe them to be. They are simply curtains. Curtains that can be pulled back at any moment by a presence that has been there, in the dark, waiting patiently for you to finally see it.
What is the most unsettling secret you've ever uncovered? Have you ever felt a presence in a house that everyone else said was safe? Share your true, chilling story in the comments below. And if you appreciate these deep dives into true, disturbing encounters, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more long-form horror. Thank you for watching.
Prince of Darkness.